This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Wednesday evening. It's October 23rd, and I'm joined tonight by Wolves beat writer Chris Hine from the Star Tribune. We have both made the pilgrimage from Los Angeles.
That's right. We sat next to each other on the plane, unknowing that we were going to be sitting next to each other.
I know. I was like late to board. Because I don't get the whole concept of like when people want to board right away, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. Like, I don't want to be late, but why do you want to sit there for a half hour? Like,
I know. Well, I do because I had a first class upgrade, so I wanted to get in that seat instead of
that was different. We did get upgraded on our little
LAX gate seat.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So here we were upgraded into first class. We're doing the Paul Rudd Hot Ones meme for like 30 seconds. It's like, hey, look at us. Look at us sitting in first class. Stroke of luck.
Now we're in our mediocre hotels.
That's right.
In Sacramento, different hotels. Mm-hmm. Well, yes. I don't know. I think we just have the one game, obviously, that's happened, and tomorrow night they'll play the Kings again, and we're in the early season time where one game naturally, good or bad, feels more good or more bad because it's the one game, and I think tomorrow night's game can have a really stabilizing effect on how people are like, me too. I don't mean that in a mocking way. Like it can bounce.
It's a good thing nobody overreacted to the first game last season and was perfectly reasonable and calm and and it turned out to be okay. So
it did. No, it is. I do think, like, to be fair, and now the Wolves have been like decent for a bit, but whether it be just for the fan base or even for us covering this team, some of this stuff is still relatively new. Losing when you're expected to win, underperforming, in places you probably shouldn't underperform. Like, you feel that more, I think, as a fan base or even the players on the team when it's a little bit more new. And conversely, last season being the example of when you exceed expectations, it is warmer and fuzzier, right? Because it's new and it's different. So I think, we move, right? Like we just keep going on to the next thing. And I always say, like, real conclusions, or even like looking at like lineup data and stuff like that, I wait like 20 games to really think that any strong conclusion can be made. I just know I've learned my lesson so many other times, being like, oh, that's it. This is for sure thing. This happened in 5 games. Right. No. And then it.
Well, but I also think like 20 game chunks is also kind of how NBA teams just look at their teams as well. It's like quarter of the season kind of mileposts, right? So if that's kind of how they're looking at it, I think that's how we, in the media should probably look at it. And we've heard, and for better or for worse, we've often heard Chris Finch say offensively, 20 games is kind of the mark where stuff clicks in for guys. And we seem to be, based off of last night and the quotes and kind of how it all played out, it was very much like last year where it was, offense looks good in the preseason, ball movement's good, everything's good. Then game 1, it just was not there. And the word sticky came out again. Everybody's favorite descriptor when the ball stops moving. And it was essentially where we were this time a year ago, but with some different caveats, I think.
Right. I do want to talk about the offense. And I do want to talk about it getting sticky and all of, and all of those things. You mentioned the first game last season against Toronto, and the person to put the blame on for the stickiness in that game was Anthony Edwards. It was after a bunch of ball movement. He shot a bunch of shots, forced it a ton. Yeah. And was, again, this is the Toronto game a year ago, was the person to point to for why it got sticky. And obviously played on volume last night, but rewatching that game on the plane, I don't think Ant had an overall sticky offensive game and was the primary culprit or the majority of the culprit for why the offense dried up the way it did. I think there was there was other factors. There was Randle, there was Conley having a bad game. And then there was newness factor with both DiVincenzo and Randle. But I do think to correct whatever is going on right now, Ant is going to be the primary person to do that. He is the leader of this team, and specifically to the offensive side of the floor, he needs to be the person to dictate. And I've been just thinking about it over the past couple of weeks and particularly last night, something I think I underrated that they lost in Karl is the consistency of efficient production. Karl had his shortcomings, but with Karl, there was a consistency of, over the course of the week, Karl was going to probably shoot 40% from 3, 55% from 2, and get you 24 and 11 or whatever. But that was just Karl. Karl was a consistent player, kind of, and offensively of what he brought. And Ant, as most young players are, has been more variable. There's been greater variance to his offensive performances, right? And I think it's important that variance is trimmed, or they're going to feel the impact, or the lack thereof of Karl's impact more if Ant doesn't get a little bit more consistent. And I think like the one area you can't really totally control consistency is like sometimes you are going to have games where you're missing shots, right? And that's not what I'm getting at. Like Ant is going to have an 8 for 24 game, and that just happens in the normalcy of all, it's just how it works. Where I think Ant can bring more consistency and efficiency to the offense overall is through his playmaking. And it's that one variable, right, which he leveled up in the playoffs for sure. But it just seems like all of Ant's ceiling is directly tied to how much better and better he gets as a playmaker for others. And I'm just curious, I think we're at a pretty critical point right now, and Ant is obviously not at the top of his arc, but just wondering where you're kind of at with Ant in terms of where his playmaking is and how he kind of has a different role as a playmaker with this team in different ways. And obviously you've been covering him all summer, writing the book. I think you're a great person to talk to about this, in that you've talked to a lot of his Olympic teammates and stuff like that as well. I know you have Ant fresh on the brain, but do you understand what I'm getting at there from a playmaking standpoint? Just
in terms of how he approaches like a game to game basis with that in mind now.
Yeah, the importance of it. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think we should maybe we should ask him maybe the next time we talk to him is like, what is your mindset now in a game? Like, are you sometimes coming into a game specifically to get your teammates going, kind of like, Nikola Jokic style, where Jokic might go out and, not take a shot for a quarter, or, something like that. Like, are you going to have kind of these moments where what's your primary focus? Is it to get open looks for yourself, which is not, a bad thing in the context of the team, because Anthony Edwards getting open looks is beneficial to the team overall. But what is your priority on a given night? Yep. You're getting yourself going and open, or getting your teammates going. And, if I had to guess, I would say that, he would probably give the politically correct answer, which is to get his teammates going. But I wonder, in his heart of hearts, if it's the other way around, if we were to pose that question to him. But I think, yes, now I feel like in this construct of the team without Karl, and especially, we'll see how Mike Conley kind of bounces back from a rough game last night, and maybe that can alleviate some things as well. But in this construct of the team, he's got to take more of the responsibility to generate more open shots for him, because, at the end of the day, the Wolves offense with Cat, break glass in case of emergency, you could just try to get Cat a 3, right? Yeah. And it's always kind of an efficient shot. That option isn't there anymore. Julius Randle kind of replacing that is not as efficient as Cat was with that. So when it comes to playmaking, he's improved. Everybody, you talk to anybody, coaching staff, players, whoever, his read of defenses has progressed maybe not exponentially, but every year of his career, it's gotten better and better. So that improves playmaking, for trying to figure out what teams are doing to you and how to respond in different ways. So that has gotten better at year 5 of his career. But now, I think it is starting to find that balance between shooting for himself and getting others going. And the other thing that we've heard a little bit throughout training camp with him, it's trying to take advantage of him off the ball as well. It's not always having the ball in his hands, because the Wolves throughout Ant's career, and one of the first things that they noticed back early in his rookie year was that, oh shoot, catch and shoot threes he's really good at. More so than off the dribble, significantly better. So they want to try to, Finch and company kind of want to try to steer him back to a little bit of that. And if there was something that maybe he garnered from the Olympic experience this offseason, it was watching Steph play off the ball and seeing that up close and personal and trying to incorporate some of that into his game a little more than previous years, because off the ball, it's the thing with Ant is off the ball. Ant is not always as engaged as on ball Ant. That's on the defensive end of the floor and the offensive end of the floor. But trying to get him a little more amped up to play off the ball this year, which might reduce the playmaking. But trying to get him going that way, I think, is also something this team is trying to do this season.
I think you can be a playmaker off the ball as well. And I think Steph would be a good example of that too, where it is basically intentionally using the gravity that you have so as to free up your teammate. I mean, we can all easily picture Steph doing that. And to some extent, given how good of a shooter Ant is and just the threat, if you let him catch what he can do with it, he will have some of that same gravity that dictates how the defense has to guard not only him but his entire team. And we're totally on the same page here. When I'm thinking about this playmaking thing with Ant, what you're saying is he prioritizing himself, his individual scoring, or setting up teammates? And I think the visual of this is like, okay, Ant's coming downhill, comes off of a screen from Rudy or isolation from the top, and he gets all the way to pretty close to the basket, where he then faces a wall of 2 or 3 defenders that are going to be really difficult to pass through. And then finally, as a last resort, I've hit the wall. He's gotten really good at making those kick out passes, to the corners.
Right.
He's got really good at that. But was that kick out pass when he took his first dribble the intention? No, the intention, I think, with Ant was to score in those situations. And I think the next level for him is when he is moving himself. He is attacking an area on the floor in a way, not with the intention to score, but because he knows the defense will go there, which will open up another teammate. And I think that's the next level for Ant. He achieved that first level thing of just being a playmaker. Okay, they put 2 on me, finding the open guy. He's gotten good at that. But can he dictate? Can he kind of play some 3D chess with that? That's a lot to ask from a 23-year-old. And so I'm not ripping on him for not having done that. I just think that's probably required for this team to achieve their goal of being a top 10 offense this year after being 16th, 17th last season. And that moves the needle for this team. That's what they kind of are going to need to do to be able to not only get to where they were last season, but to go on beyond that. And I don't think Ant is there yet, and I'm really interested to track it over the next 81 games of the season of how much more he is using himself as a weapon, not as a scorer, but to set things up. And I think like the perfect example of him not being there yet is him not being good at throwing lobs to Rudy.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you're the guy throwing the lob pass to the rolling center, right? Your job is to attract the defense that you are the bigger threat than the rolling big. And Ant struggles to do that because Ant just goes, he doesn't set up the defense. He just kind of tries to blow through it. Whereas if he dictated the defense coming 2-3 steps more to the right, well, then that drop off to Rudy or that lob is there. But that doesn't happen very often. I think those guys are developing more of a chemistry, but it started at a low place. And that's because when Ant was 21, was his first year with him. Ant didn't have this. He didn't have this real ability or intention to set up other teammates. And if he starts doing that, and it's not just Rudy, I mean, you can do the same thing, to find guys on the perimeter. But if you're dictating in that way, I mean, that's when it gets special, right? That's the Patrick Mahomes, right?
Right.
That's the next level, and that's the Jordan. Like that like if you get there to that point, is Jordan what, it isn't just being the volume of scoring, it's being the magnet that sets up, that magnetizes the defense, that sets up your other teammates. And I'm curious to see where Ant gets this season.
To your point, it's like the analogy of the chessboard. It's seeing the whole chessboard and not just what's in front of you. And I think he's getting better with that. It's like, if I drive here against this defense, this guy is going to react this way on that side of the floor, and then this pass might be there. It's like it's kind of that, right? Like for multiple years, especially year 3 going into year 4 for Ant, one of the things that, just talking to whether it's Finch or Kyle Anderson, when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago for the book, having Ant get off of the ball when 2 players were blitzing him was a process, and getting him to throw it to the proper guy. Like, for instance, if a guy was coming from Ant's right, his natural inclination would be to throw it to the left.
Yeah.
Right. That took a long time for Finch to basically say, well, if a guy's coming to the right pass might be to kind of throw where the blitz is coming from, right?
Yep.
And throw it to that side. So like steps like that, like just when you're in the moment and it's instinctual, and you drill it and you show it over and over again, it takes time to really ingrain that. And he got better as the year went on last year. That was a big improvement for him, year 3 to year 4, and especially in the playoffs. Huge. But now it's the kind of Luka level of seeing the floor. That's where he's got to get to. Like Luka knew and knows like how everybody on a defense is going to be reacting if he does a certain thing a certain way, or if they run a certain action. And it's kind of drilling all that right now. That's where he's got to get to. And Ant has a good feel for the game. It's not on that level of like a Luka, right? But he learns the game very quickly. He processes it, and he can get there. It just takes time, and it takes repetition, and it takes film, and it takes him seeing it a lot, applying it. And that's how Anthony Edwards gets better every year. It's been a gradual process, but everything takes time. So you can't just say, hey, Ant, do this and this defense is going to react this way. It's just hard to do that in the moment. It comes with being 23 years old in the NBA is honestly part of it too. Yeah.
Well, so to the 23-year-old point, he was with the Stephs and the Kevin Durants and the LeBron Jameses in the summer. And I want to talk about your perspective on the influence that has had. Let's grab our first break though, quick here to let everyone know that today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And with Treasure Island, we've been telling you a lot about the watch parties they have every Sunday for Vikings games, and the Wolves watch parties they're going to have throughout this season. But there is, as I've gone there and gotten to see their facilities, there's just a lot more to Treasure Island than just the casino room there. And one of the big things at Treasure Island is concerts. And I think it's really one of the most underrated places in Minnesota for concerts. They have 2 huge concert venues, one indoor and one outdoor. Last summer, they had their Music by the Mississippi festival. They had Creed played at that. I didn't know that. Creed was there. Weird Al Yankovic, amongst others, is going to be playing there next summer. That's at the outdoor amphitheater. But they also have the indoor amphitheater for concerts in the fall and winter. I saw Bret Michaels is playing there next Saturday on November 2nd. And so what we want to do with this partnership with Treasure Island is just put on your radar some more things that Treasure Island has that you might not know. So for more information, you can go to ticasino.com, and there you can purchase yourself some tickets to these concerts. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks, and there will be a new set of numbers for the Wolves players. It'll be interesting. I always kind of think it's interesting to see how the numbers move, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker's more or less total for points in the first game was 5.5. Well, I think he had 16 last night. So does that move? Does it not move? Do they keep it sticky there? Does it move too much? And then you should go under it. I think it's kind of a fun game to play, especially at the beginning of the season with some of these Wolves players. They also have they will have the Ant free square this whole week. So if Ant scores a point, you get one of your squares in your lineup taken care of. So we've been talking a lot about football Prize Picks, obviously throughout September and October, but basketball is here, and that's another fun way to play Prize Picks. And you can do that at prizepicks.com or in the Prize Picks app. Use the promo code Dane, and if you do, when you submit your first $5 lineup, you will instantly be credited with $50 into your account. Okay, Chris. So in theory, for Ant to make this, whatever we're calling it, the next level of playmaking for him, the term that seems to be on my mind is like the playmaker that dictates. It dictates what the defense is going to do. And I think LeBron is a really good example of that. We can all kind of picture that, right? Where you watch LeBron play and you can tell sometimes from afar, from 10,000 feet, that he wasn't actually trying to be a threat there himself. He was trying to pull the defense over here so as to get Anthony Davis wide open for, a bucket underneath. Steph, we talked about that some. KD does that in his own way. They all actually kind of do that in very different ways. But again, for the book and the articles you've written, you've talked to those guys, at least Steph and KD, about Ant and what he does need to do to kind of keep ascending. How I mean, obviously it was influential being in the Olympics, but how influential do you think it was specific to these things that we're talking about now and the leadership role he plays on the Timberwolves for this 2024-25 season?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you see how these guys work, and you see what LeBron does before a game, what Steph does in his workouts, and how KD perfects his shot and maintains that. And I think that sort of stuff maybe shows up a little more off the court than it does on the court.
Sure.
When it comes to when we're talking about reading defenses and things like that. I think it shows up more in leadership, more in how you carry yourself, how you prepare, how you take care of yourself, how you work out, all that stuff. I think that's where the Olympics really, really will have a big impact on him. And he's already, obviously already started kind of incorporating some of the things that he learned from these guys over the summer. They're all convinced that, he's on a trajectory for MVPs and championships, and both Steph and KD, when I talked to them, said the same thing. That's where they see his career going, and they said he was also just a lot of fun, a lot of energy, as you can imagine. But and I think that's the same around the Wolves. Is he leads with his energy. He leads with the cliche by example, right? His work ethic, his energy lifts the team around him, and that's even more pronounced now that he's in year 5. It started to get more pronounced last season. He started becoming more of a vocal leader. And little tease for the book. Hopefully, there's a story in the playoffs that people will enjoy related to that when it comes out.
Okay.
And right. And then that's just even more like he's been fully given the reins. That's what the Cat trade did. Like that's where he's at in his career right now. And it's kind of the second act, so to speak, of Anthony Edwards' career that we're in right now. And it kind of informed by his Olympic experience.
Yeah, I like the idea of like leading with energy versus leading with intellect, right?
Right.
And the best ones do both. We saw Ant last night lead with energy, wake up, everybody saw that clip of him yelling at everybody. They're down 15 in the third quarter, second quarter. And he's yelling at everybody, to wake up. That's leading with energy and delivered effectively. If your teammates, that can be helpful. I just think the area where Ant is going to see the most returns and it is going to be when he leads with intellect. And that's what he did. Particularly, that Phoenix series was the turning point. He understood the way in which they were guarding them, and he used that to his advantage. Now, I think that was like 101 level. And LeBron and Steph and KD are the 300 level, right? Are doctorates. Right. But that makes it sound like there's a massive gap between Ant and them.
He's on his way. He is on his way. Like, to say that he won't get to that level is, I think, untrue, because every year he has, like I said before, he has gotten better. He has the experience in reading the game. It's just gotten better every year. So it's just it is like an education in a way, where it just take time, it takes experience, it takes certain courses and some certain exams and
good comp by me.
You right, exactly. You pass some and you fail others, and things like that. So I think that's a good comparison, is that it is like an education that you're working your way through to ultimately earn your doctorate in NBA basketball, so to speak,
which is a ring,
right? Exactly. So that's kind of where he's at right now in the arc of his career. And it's a lot, because you have a lot of expectations. He's just still 23,
right?
And that's still very young in NBA years,
right? And looks young. I don't mean that in totally in a I don't mean that in like a bad way, really. And it's just like obvious watching Anthony Edwards play that he's going to improve, and I say that sometimes when he's making the plays that make me pull my hair out, where you're like, okay, yeah, that's not it, right? But then you remind yourself, like, to your point, there's been plenty of things we could go through in his career. A rookie year, the off-ball defense was awful. And that slowly progressed. So the playmaking, putting 2 on him, freaked him out for like a whole year, and then he did what he did in the Phoenix series. So I'd say that to myself, to be like, because I've covered him his whole career, and I was the one being like, this off-ball defense is so bad, or why, like, where is the playmaking accuracy?
Yeah.
And then you wait about whatever, a few months or a year, and the thing that you were complaining about is mitigated or significantly less frequent. I just think the most curious part of all of this is not if it's going to improve, it's when.
Right.
And
that's exactly it. Yeah.
And that's sports, and that's awesome. Like, that's the fun part of this, is like, is tracking the rate at which he grows and the steps he takes to do that. And it's just, the Cat trade comes fast, and it felt like really quick that now all of a sudden we're playing games, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, Cat is gone. This is Ants. This is the Ant is the dictator. And I'm just curious to see how that progression ends up unfolding. But it's probably enough Ant talk. The other main, I guess main playmaker, but a primary playmaker on this team this season is going to be Julius Randle. And I think, last night when Kyle and I did the immediate reaction afterwards, I think I kind of got it a little bit backwards, where I said Randle looked really rusty at the beginning, and then kind of shook off some of that rust over the course of the game. I think I just got that backwards, because I was rewatching it today, and he actually started really well as a playmaker and a scorer for them. And then the turning point, or at least what I put down in my notes, was, I think you'll remember this, he had that one open 3 above the break on the right side of the floor, and he didn't take it, and he opted to drive, and he got called for a charge. He charged into LeBron. And it was like, from there is when it's shifted. Like, the way in which he was playmaking and scoring really shifted in that game, and it like almost like that dysregulated him and like tapped into the rusty parts of his game. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that, at least of my position on what I saw from him. But I guess just what stood out to you from the first real Julius Randle game, and how much of this should we be reacting to, and how much of it is, oh yeah, this is just a time thing?
I guess seeing him up close and in the context of what the Wolves are asking him to do and what they've said, I saw kind of both sides of the coin when it came to him. I saw what Finch was talking about in terms of the playmaking and what he might be able to do for the offense.
Yep.
But I also saw some of the kind of impressions that I came into it with kind of what his kind of having the ball does for the offense, the the physicality with which he plays. I kind of saw both things on display.
Yeah, I did too.
Like the good and the bad. I think, and so I think it's just trying to find that balance of merging his style with how the Wolves like to play. And what I did a story for Randle for Tuesday's paper, and I asked Finch last week in New York about the whole ball movement perception that Randle has, and I said, you like a free flowing ball movement oriented offense, and Finch's answer was, yeah, but I like open shots better. And that was kind of his response to, well, if Julius is going to be a ball stopper, so to speak, if he's creating open shots at the end of it, then that's okay.
I think I love that answer. I think where we're going to see that is when he gets doubled. And there was one possession in the game last night where it was, I think it was him and Mike, and Mike was guarded by D'Angelo Russell, and Julius Randle was guarded by Rui Hachimura. And they just did a high pick and roll, and the Lakers just switched it. And Randle was like, okay, I have D'Angelo Russell on me, and kind of calls for the ball at kind of the elbow extended right there, and he has a mismatch to go at, and obviously they need to bring the double in that situation because Randle will eat that. And it was like ping ping ping, ended up in a kick to DiVincenzo for three, and I was like, oh, that's what Finch wants. That's it, and that will be great when that happens consistently. The question is, can his one-on-one offense be good enough to warrant double teams and that extra attention, so as to be able to trigger the what the action that comes off of it? And I think given his rust and acclimating into a new place, I don't think he's going to warrant that attention a ton right away.
Right.
But in the first really good game, when he's just a problem for whoever to guard and they start having to bring two, I think that's when we'll be like, okay, and now look at what's happening off of Randle's play. But he's got to kind of first assert himself to demand that, and that's where you kind of get into some of those like, all right, Randle's going at this guy again.
Right. Well, that's just it. He's got to get into a rhythm himself, scoring in order to do that. And you got to remember, that was his first regular season game since late January.
For sure.
So he's playing himself back into a rhythm early on in the season here. So I don't think that can be underestimated. You're just not familiar with it because he wasn't here for that. But yeah, that was his first regular season game in 9 months, essentially. So he's going to have to find a rhythm to do exactly that, what you're saying, to gain that respect, because right now everybody on the scouting report is like, all right, well, we got to stop Ant. And if that means we have to let Julius Randle try and cook us, then that's probably the bet they're going to make. Right.
All right.
So, he's got to find that gear, and it might take some time just because he is coming back for the first time in a while. So
it also he was often just guarded by Anthony Davis. You know,
that too,
like that,
which
like
is
I
a
just
problem.
right, yeah, you know, it's just like
Yeah.
that's a hard one to even like
That's
be
a
able to
hard one.
score on one
Mhm.
on one. It was as I just started after he had that charge on LeBron, and you could just kind of see he was off a little bit, and he tried to like
Mhm.
you could see him trying to get back into a rhythm, and he tries getting into one of those like typical Julius Randle sort of like self creations in the mid range, and it's like just kind of got swallowed up by Anthony Davis because
Yeah.
Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. So um, that's where the Finch 3D chess is like, how can we put Randle in situations? If the team is playing switch and five, right? Let's do it. Let's get that every single time. Let's get that Russell Randle switch and let's play off of that. You know, let's
Yeah.
get into action quick. Whoever, you know, whatever that looks like in, you know, the Kings matchup tomorrow night. Can you go to put him in those positions where he isn't needing to go one-on-one against an Anthony Davis or some just a good, strong power forward defender. I think that needs to be schemed up a little bit. And then that's where Randle at this stage can take advantage of it. And if he does catch a rhythm, if he does end up being getting back to the all NBA player he was, then I don't think you're going to need to really script that out for him as much. But I think a lot of this is on Finch to get him going and to doing it effectively while trying to play this greater like ball movement game. Like that's tough.
Mhm.
That's gonna be a needle
It's
to
going to be.
thread.
It really is. Well, it really is because that's just the style
Yeah.
of how he plays. I mean, look, it's not like Cat was a swift ball mover either.
Right.
When it, so it's not as if they don't have
But that
experience
isn't
with
even the
this. But
standard. That doesn't. I mean,
right,
I guess that is a
right,
standard, but they want to be
right.
better than that
They want
too.
to be better
Like,
than that, right?
yeah.
Well, because
As a team,
if you have a design on being a top 10 offense, you got to be better than that. So I'm with you. It's a tricky needle to thread, and that's where I think this team, the game one might be more indicative of what we're going to see early in the season last year than last year's game one was.
Sure.
right? That's the biggest difference between last year and this year, and I don't know that gets solved, tomorrow night in Sacramento,
right.
or it gets solved next week when they're playing Denver and I forget who else is Dallas. Yeah, like some tough matchups early in the season here.
You know what I think is
that might be a thing that takes 15 to 20 games to really start going.
If we want to call it the 15 games or whatever, while they're finding it, if that's how long it's gonna take, so as to not be 8-7 at the end of that and have a better record. I think where they're gonna have to get that from is defensively, right? Just we are kind of playing like almost understanding and accepting that we're probably gonna play some mediocre offense for a while, just like in the aggregate, because we're figuring it out. But if they have the intensity and the intention on defense, which they had for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 of the 48 minutes last night.
Yeah.
If they get back to the frequency with which they were doing that last season, well, that was that team last year, right?
Right.
Mediocre on offense, but inspired good offensive situations by just playing really good defense and that tenacious defense that gets you out in like semi-transition opportunities. You're forcing turnovers, you're catching long rebounds and going. Like I think in the first quarter of this season, the defense is going to be critical, man, in being able to inspire the offensive side of the floor while also being, the defense, right? Of just like preventing points from being scored. I thought it was, we were talking about this before we hit record, Jace's tweet about what Finch said after the game last night of maybe needing to simplify the defense a little bit because the players got confused with some of the coverages in that game, and confusion. I think this is stealing Jace's line exactly, but confusion makes players less assertive, which sometimes makes them look lazy, and that's kind of what that game looked and felt like at times,
especially
in
early
one.
in the second quarter. Yeah.
And that was no Gobert on the floor.
Well, but this is another point I wanted to make, kind of relative to the difference between last year and this year, is you do have significant pieces coming back here that are not used to the way the Wolves play defense, the way they vary coverages, the way that they might vary coverages based on Rudy being on the floor, not being on the floor. And we saw when Rudy first got here, how much of an adjustment that could be for some players. They tried to streamline it going into last year and make it all kind of the same thing. But I think there's just differences, especially if you're trying to incorporate some zone into that.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
So I think you're seeing that as well. That took time to figure out how they were going to play defense here. And so when you have two new guys, playing major minutes and incorporating themselves into this, that might take some ironing out as well. And, there were a lot of scouts at last night's game, and I was talking to a scout before the game, and, obviously anything you talk to scouts about the Wolves, they want to talk about the trade and the ramifications of it. And this one scout I talked to, he actually felt that the Wolves are going to feel it on the defensive end of the floor too, because he thought Cat and just the ability of Cat the way they had Cat playing defense and his ability with Gobert to really shrink the space in the lane. He doesn't know that that's necessarily going to be there this year This is just one scout's opinion, but
but that's look at the second quarter.
Right,
that is exactly what it looked like, you know?
Yeah.
And the Wolves went to zone at the beginning of that second quarter to do that, like to fill up space. Like that's the intention of zone, right? Because it's just crazy. Like they're going to be undersized when Rudy's off the floor. Like that's just a fact.
So, and that leads to rebounding issues and as we saw last night. So I thought we hadn't really looked at it from that perspective, but that was kind of his thought was
prescient.
Just the amount of space they gobble up when somebody gets into the lane. Rudy at the rim, more often than not, but Karl also kind of being there too made it difficult for people when they got
Karl
in there.
Always rebounded his space on the floor well.
Yeah.
Like, if it was in Karl's bubble, for a defensive rebound, Karl was getting it. He wasn't like a Vanderbilt, like all of a sudden, like here I got this rebound, from
storing over guys and things like that.
But Karl was also an extremely consistent rebounder, and Naz has not been a consistent rebounder in his career, and obviously, I think that's a place they need more from Randle than they got last night. But he has been a better rebounder than he showed last night. But I thought a lot of that was effort with Randle. I mean, the one Austin Reeves offensive rebound on the free throw was, he just kind of pretended that he was going away. So Randle didn't put in the effort to put a body on Austin Reeves, and Reeves played a trick on him and just went right around him and grabbed the offensive rebound on a free throw. Like that's not okay. Or that, I mean, I guess it's all okay, but it's just they get the ball back, and you have rebounding problems.
Right.
So it's
and again, this is probably where this being Randle's first game in 9 months, maybe.
Yep.
You show him some of this stuff on film, and it's like, oh, okay, I really, got to get back into the flow of it. So
I got to imagine that one in particular. That it's literally a free throw rebound. I mean, I would be shocked if in the film session if that got on there, he would just go like, my bad. Yeah, I didn't box out on that one. Like busted. You could see it.
Yeah.
Historically, he's not that guy.
No, he's not. He's generally a good rebounder. So
we talked about to us in the locker room after the game too. Is like, we got killed on the boards, and I took that personal. That's my responsibility. He said, he did say those things after the game there. Okay, I did two more quick things before we wrap here, but that's interesting to note, right? Let's think about the defense. Let's think about simplifying it. I always do wonder, I think zone is sometimes what teams try to go to in basketball to simplify their defense, but are in fact complicating it because it's just something very different than man. It's really easy to
instinctually it's a switch. I mean, it is a switch, but
and then in the NBA
they should be able to handle.
Like in the NBA, zones get just get bent all the time of given spacing and the weapons that there are out there. Like every zone in the NBA functions more like a matchup zone than when we watch college or whatever.
Sure.
It's
Yes.
2-3 there. So, but they got to figure that out. And I don't know. I didn't like the zone, and I think when coaches go to zone, that shows a real lack of confidence in that defensive group at that time, and that might have been because Jaden couldn't play with that group. Jaden's got to play in those Randle Reed minutes, but he had his fouls. I think that he helped.
It's a very what's the word I want? Not old school mentality that you have about zone defenses. Zone defense conveys weakness,
right? I mean, kind of. Like,
it's a very. I mean, there's a time and a place. That's a very NBA way of thinking about zone defense. Zone defense is weakness. Yeah.
Well, you're right. It would be more NBA, but it's just kind of like this team hired JJ Redick to be their coach and has said nothing but we want to shoot more and more threes. And you come out in the second quarter, you're like, zone, that's not super
right.
I think that's raising a little bit of we're a little bit concerned about what we can do defensively with this group. And so they're going to need to find an overall refined defensive identity, but I think specifically in the non-Rudy minutes, remember Finch would always say Rudy set the tone for the defense. Like he is the defensive identity, even if he's not on the floor.
And they largely played similarly.
Yeah, they could.
When he wasn't on the floor than when he was last season. It wasn't like that wasn't what they tried to do 2 years ago, but last season it kind of was. It was very similar.
Because Carl was miraculously had his best season and drop of his career. It was kind of like we were saying the same thing at this time last year of what's it going to look like defensively in the non-Rudy minutes? Is Carl going to be able to? And he acquitted himself well in that, and it wasn't. Part of it was because he was playing second units. And that should be the Reed Randle stuff, beginning in the second quarter, beginning in the fourth quarter, that they're not playing against the main guys. But they got to get that cat energy and apply it to the defense. Okay, like I said, two more quick things before we wrap. Conley stunk in last night's game. What do we make of that? I know my
until proven otherwise, it's a one-off. It's
okay. Thank you. I was stumbling. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Until proven otherwise, it's a one-off bad game for Mike Conley.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at with that.
And they
I'm not going to read too much into that.
No, I don't think I am either. I think that did happen a couple times last year. It's weird.
Sure.
Mike, when he had bad games, had really bad games. There wasn't very many of them, but he didn't ever have just kind of that was poor. But he was if it was bad, it was really
it
bad.
Was really bad. Yeah.
And it was the first game. And that's not obviously on paper, that's not an encouraging signal when it's your 37-year-old player who's, another year older.
Correct. But I'm
just
giving him the benefit of the doubt for now. Yeah. 100%.
Just the last, I mean, the Dallas series was not good from Mike. There was some injury.
He said yesterday he wasn't even at 50% in that series. So that definitely stood out to me. So
and he might be getting his sea legs too of
sure, he's got to maybe ramp it up a little bit. Yeah, exactly. So let's see. Let's give him some time.
I'm with that too. I just it felt
I mean, it was
we didn't talk about it last night.
It was noticeable. It was noticeable. Anybody watching, especially in that first half, that it was. A few people were calling it very kind of almost like a D'Lo-esque when D'Lo would be bad for the Wolves. That's kind of what it felt like from Mike last night. But let's. Hard
to overcome.
Yeah.
Given how important D'Lo was to that group and how important Mike is to this group. Okay. Then last thing, Kyle and I kind of went through the Gobert extension from a more technical standpoint of, they shed Rudy's $47 million.
Are they going to have to update the spreadsheets on your beer now?
I know they fall a knife, man. We're going to have to do it. Yeah. Well, I need to update my salaries. They're not even updated. I still got Canabates Diop in mine,
right.
And I think we're still waiting on I've asked. We're still waiting on what the numbers are going to be officially on that Rudy contract. How they want to kind of set that. That's 3-1-10. That they're adding on there, but Are they going to do that at a flat rate, or ascending, descending?
Right.
They're working on that today, is what I was told. So
yeah,
we'll figure out exactly what the economic impact of that is going forward. We have a long time until the trade deadline or the next transaction window where that stuff is really is really pertinent. But we know there's more room to fudge below the second apron now, given the pay cut that Rudy is taking. But I think what got overshadowed in just the timing of when this news broke and everything is just the idea that Rudy Gobert, who got traded for, did not sign with the Timberwolves. That wasn't that long ago, 2 years ago, and had a really rough first season, was at a place where he wants to commit to being here and liking to be, it likes being here enough to not only want to sign on long term, but to do so in a way that is very arguably not even at his market value.
Yeah,
I would be shocked if Rudy Gobert went into free agency next summer, turned down his player option, and wasn't able to just in the free market find a way, whether it be through sign and trade or something like that, to get more than 3 years, $110 million. But he wanted to, he wanted to lock it up. He wanted to stay, similar to Mike. Like we said that with Mike Conley's extension he signed last summer. Like, what? Mike signed for $9 million?
Yeah. These guys are serious when they mean that they want to try to win here, and they recognize that.
Yeah, that's significant. And I don't want to brush over that part of it so as to just focus on the second apron or whatever, this and that. Like, there's something culturally significant to that. And I know you wrote about that this morning. You were the one asking Rudy about the extension in the locker room after the game last night. Just kind of curious of, you and I haven't talked about just your sort of like internal thoughts on the move.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. It seems like it is, a version of just trying to help the team stay together as much as possible for this next kind of window that they have coming up here, however many years you want to put on it. I guess if you're ascribing this window to Rudy's peak, it's this year and then now 2 more, at least, right?
Yeah.
That you're hoping that by the time he's 32 now, by age 34 season, he's still near what he is now. So that's kind of signaling from the team that this is what maybe they think the window is as well, and where they think this could go. So instead of it being like, if Carl was still on the team, instead of it being like a 1-year window where they just push all the chips in with Carl and, pay whatever luxury tax, worry about second apron consequences later. Like, okay, now we're starting to see maybe how long into the future they can kind of extend this, right? Yeah. So, you have Mike Conley on for this season and the next one. You have Rudy on for this season and then 2 more. Yeah. So now we're starting to see the next piece of it, that's going to have to get answered here is Julius Randle / Naz Reid player options. And, where that fits in. We know Tim Connolly is very high on Naz Reid, and having him be a part of this future. And when Tim generally says stuff about a player like that, he means it. And, just like with this Rudy extension throughout the summer, he said, we would ideally love Rudy to retire here in Minnesota. And here you go. Here's and next thing you know, a few months later, here's an extension for Rudy Gobert. So when Tim Connolly says those things, he doesn't say them lightly. Right. So we don't know kind of where Julius Randle is going to be fitting into that puzzle. And obviously a lot of that is dependent on how this season is going to play out, but we're starting to get some answers maybe where they see this iteration of the Wolves. This window is. Yeah. And I think now I think it's tied to Rudy. I think it's this year and maybe 2 more.
I think, and you'll know what I'm talking about because Finch has said it a few times in training camp, but he said it before the game last night when he was doing media about this idea of the NBA having a lot of parity at this point, being open to a good handful of teams to be a champion, that it's about getting there consistently, getting to the playoffs, getting the high seed and having numerous bites at the apple, and just consistently being there so as to have the chance. He referenced when he was talking about it. Sorry, I should have cut this clip, but Boston consistently got there and then broke through. And I think what he is describing is kind of the philosophy that they have organizationally here is of every year, particularly in this Ant window, of putting themselves in a position to be there, to to compete, and having the window extend. I think it goes against that Finch philosophy to have an all-in year, to have just be one. And I think that's part of the motivation behind the trade, just given the economics of Carl's contract. Whether it was this year or shortly thereafter, there was an end coming, or there was a year where it was clearly like the last dance of what the group was going to be. And maybe that would have been probably would have been this season
year, right?
If they wouldn't have traded Carl. And I don't think they like the idea of that, with Ant being 23 years old. And I get that. So they are setting the roster up in a way that gives them windows that are bigger than a year. And I like I like the logic and the strategy behind that.
That's exactly it. And I wrote this at the time, just kind of breaking it down. But the Cat trade, everything that Tim Connolly has done since the moment he got here has been with Ant in mind, right?
Yep.
And I think the Ant or the Cat trade is to ensure that this Timberwolves team doesn't have to hit a reset at some point, right? Yeah. Or that they box themselves into such a corner financially or what have you, right? That they can't field a really competitive team, because I think that is ultimately the way that you would lose in Anthony Edwards 5 years from now, is if you are not competitive. I really do think market size, all that stuff doesn't matter to him. What matters to him is winning and having a chance of winning a championship. So as long as you're close and you're there, and you'll keep them. If you're not, and you're going through a rebuild 4 or 5 years from now or whatever it is,
there's the possibility.
There's the possibility that you lose him, right? So
and we've seen that story.
Game.
We've seen that story. Like, choose your 27-year-old star who was with a team for 8 years or 9 years and then moved.
Right.
Like, that's what it is. They just kept. I mean, this is the whole LeBron. Every team he's ever been on it was constantly with an all-in energy, and that kind of caused him to move teams as much as he did, because it was always, once that team's sort of got to a point where their assets were depleted or they were going to have to hit a rebuild, well, that's when he took off, and that's they don't want Ant to be in that situation. I think that's really good and encouraging. Just encouraging foresight going forward. Why don't you, Chris, tell people about what you've been writing this week, because I know you've been traveling all over the country this month and working on a lot of different features, books, but just articles. You've had a lot of stuff out at the Star Tribune this week.
Yeah, we've got the Ant story on the Olympic experience from Sunday, which is a bit of a teaser for the last chapter of the book I'm working on, which is going to be all about his Olympic experience. We got a Julius Randle piece where I talked to him and Finch about their time in New Orleans together and how that mirrors and doesn't mirror what's happening here in Minnesota. We talked to Mike yesterday at Shoot Around, so we did a little thing on what you can expect minutes-wise from Mike Conley this year, load management and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Breaking down the Rudy contract, game coverage. It's all there. Subscribe to our website. Help us out here. Help keep me getting these first class upgrades on
it's
subscribe to the Star Tribune.
I do think sometimes, maybe particularly in the newspaper writing space, some people get in the mindset that it is just like game recaps. But whether it's Chris or John or Jace, they're writing these takeout pieces all the time, and it just I read a lot of NBA content, just other team specific stuff, and there is all three of you do a volume of work in that way that is rare and unique for a specific fan base, and the extra added perk that we have in Chris is that he's always there. He was with the team through preseason. He's on the road with them for almost every single road game. And Chris, you were just this, but you are an invaluable resource to this show. Just because I am the occasional traveler.
I always appreciate it because I feel like this show also helps get the work out there, and new audiences that maybe don't always subscribe to the newspaper, but subscribe because it is important. If you can, it's always my pitch.
It's good writing too. It's just you guys are all
it's a good crew to be around too. All of us. This is my 7th year now. And
we are lucky in that way.
We are very lucky that it's a good crew to be around, because there are experiences.
What if we would have hated each other?
Right,
and
exactly.
Then we both got this first class upgrade today. We're sitting out on the plane,
and we're just I gotta sit by him again. God damn it. No, but listen, I've seen beats before where people have to be around each other. They don't really like each other all that much. So we're lucky here in Minnesota for sure.
We just all don't like Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
What's going on, Kyle?
No, this is this is fun. Fun hanging out in LA, and I will. I'm just gonna watch basketball and fall asleep here very soon. So I
wish I could just do that. I've got words to write. We're still not done.
Oh man.
Well, we're getting into the right now. I'm writing about last season.
Cool, man. That's
it's a fun chapter.
Writing a book and being a beat writer at the same time. He's Chris Hine. That's a terrible idea.
This is what happens when you don't have a personal life, everybody. you get married to your work.
He's Christopher Hine. You can follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. Again, everything we're talking about, if you're just like, wait, actually, how do I subscribe to read Chris's work? StarTribune.com. You can sign up for online subscriptions there, and of course, get the newspaper delivered if you would prefer it in that way. Coming up next on the show, we have the game in Sacramento on Thursday evening, and on Friday morning, Britt and I will connect to talk about whatever happens in the Kings game in Game 2. Chris, thank you for coming.
No problem. Anytime.
All right. Until Friday with Britt. He's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Grinning hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.